Today, we're going to talk about U.S. clinical experience for IMGs, and I hope to lead you through some of the pitfalls and best practices. First, some general comments. U.S. clinical experiences are an incredibly valuable and important part of any application for residency. I can't emphasize that sufficiently. Residency programs may require a specific number, sort of a specific minimum number of US clinical experiences for application consideration, and they may disqualify or decide not even to review applicants who don't possess these minimum numbers. So pay attention when you do apply to programs to see whether or not they specify this or not. The general consensus, I think, across the boards is that strong US clinical experience that results in personalized letters of recommendation, not generic ones, can really improve one's chances of a successful match. Now, I can tell you that there is no research data to support this contention. Trust me, I've looked. I like data, but I can't find data on this. But I think all of us have had the experience many times over of seeing candidates who were very strong, who had great scores, had many things to recommend them, yet they didn't have U.S. clinical experience, and that was one of the real weak points of their application, which denied them essentially interviews. Most US clinical experiences are provided through third-party companies or through individuals who act as brokers, although there are some individuals who offer them just themselves. And there's a lot of variety as to the practices, the cost, the quality of the rotations. So your job is to figure all this out. There are US clinical experiences that are offered by university programs, and those I think are very good. Sometimes they're not just 1 month, but they're experiences that are of longer duration. But these rotations will require individual application. They're going to be competitive with limited spots, and they have application deadlines that may be difficult for residency seekers who need flexibility. So if you, for instance, learn that you have a visa and you have a certain amount of time to be here to do a rotation, you need a company or an individual who understands that, who can make that happen for you in relatively short notice. So you may not have the luxury of time on your side. What are the hallmarks of valuable US clinical experiences? Well, those that are valuable, those that are meaningful, are hands-on for sure. They're hands-on experiences that allow you to have patient interactions, and the clinical work that you're performing will be under the supervision of experienced faculty. Inpatient experiences in a hospital or a program with name recognition or ACGME affiliation would be obviously the preferred setting. And in general, I would say that inpatient rotations really have more impact on your application than outpatient rotations. But remember that if you're somebody who's applying for family medicine or internal medicine, pediatrics, and are interested in outpatient practice, then having 1 or 2 letters from outpatient rotations may also serve you well. So I don't want to be too strict, but I would say that inpatient rotations in general mean a lot more. What do these rotations really do for you? Well, they allow you exposure to workflow practices in this country, to probably one of the common EMRs, either Epic or Cerner. They allow you to practice communication and some teamwork in US healthcare settings. You have the ability to enhance your skills. You're going to hopefully do some H&Ps, or tie some knots, I guess, if you're in the surgical arena, or show that you are able to communicate well with your peers and with patients. You can showcase your empathy. You can showcase critical thinking. And typically, you'll have opportunities to do short oral presentations on topics that can enhance your presentation skills in front of an audience, even if it's a small group. You may have exposure to other residents depending on where the clinical experience is held, and you will have professional endorsements so that you can get letters of recommendation from US physicians. The other thing which may happen, depending on where the rotation is that it may allow you networking with GME physicians, whether they're the program directors, the APDs, or faculty. Now, ensuring good rotations, though, is somewhat of a tricky business. So I would say to you, please do your research carefully before you pay thousands of dollars for rotations, because these are one of your biggest expenses in residency application. So some of the questions that I think will help you to determine which rotations are really valuable and which are maybe less valuable to you. So ask, how many other students will be assigned on this rotation? Recognize that if you have one attending and he or she has 3, 4 students, you may have really some robust teaching. If you have an attending that has many more students than that, I would consider that a red flag in most circumstances, and I'll talk about some of the exceptions. Who are the attendings? Are these individuals that are affiliated with the university or with the ACGME? Those kinds of affiliations actually have some meaning. Are they a junior faculty or a full professor, a department chair, a PD? Who are the attendings? In general, the more senior the attending or the older the attending, to some extent, the more able they will be to provide you with a letter that actually has comparisons, that can compare you. Let's say they can say, over the last 10 years, I've worked, monthly with medical students, and student X was among the top 10 that I've worked with during my career. And so that can really be helpful for you. How many attendings can I have? As I said, you can have more than one attendings on a rotation. You don't necessarily only need one. In fact, it may be preferable for you to have more than one. But just recognize that you can't have attendings that switch out every couple of days, because they won't get to know you well enough, and it will be more difficult for them then to be able to write a letter. What's the weekly configuration of the rotation? So I personally believe you should at least have 4 days per week of contact, and that the rotation should at least be 3 weeks in duration. I'm sure there's some exceptions to this, some shorter rotations, but in general, I'm talking about strong inpatient or even outpatient rotations where you want the letter writer to be able to say, I worked with student X over the month of April. The rotation required that, that attendance for Mondays through Fridays, this is what the student did, et cetera, so they can describe the nature of the rotation in their letter before they start talking sort of about your performance. Are there students who have done this rotation with whom I can speak? That's very helpful if you can have some students who've done the rotation and who can give you the green light and say it was a great rotation. So talk to some other students and who've done the rotation. They may even suggest to you a particular attending that they found was really wonderful, and you may be able to then somehow figure out how to ask for that attending specifically. Now, all the caveats that I'm talking here about 3 to 4 students, and how many attendings, the weekly configurations to some extent, those may not apply for virtual experiences that aren't hands-on. So I would worry less about those things if all you have is a virtual experience. And I'll say a little bit more about virtual experience later. What's the description of a strong US clinical experience or a rotation? Well, here's one in internal medicine. They tell you it's hands-on, it's inpatient for 80%. Yeah, there's a portion that's didactic and procedural skills. It's about 20%, but most of it is inpatient. And they do warn you, so to speak, that some of the didactic teaching is going to be virtual in nature, which is just fine. What's the duration? It's 4 weeks. It's Monday through Friday. The rotation is at a university hospital in some city or state, and it tells you that that hospital actually has an IMG-friendly residency training program. It doesn't mean that you're going to interact with the resident, but it has a residency training program, which gets you a little closer to potentially maybe talking to someone in that program. It's going to be a single attending, they say, who owns clinical medicine professorship. So it's someone who has experience and has a faculty appointment. So these are really positive things. No more than 4 students on the rotation, so you feel like you're going to get adequate, time and attention. What about letters of recommendation? What's promised? Well, they say we'll provide them to students who have met the attendance requirements, who have been professional in their activities, and who are engaged in learning. And they let you know that all the letters are individualized, with the caveat that, of course, the quality of the letter is going to be dependent on your effort, your engagement, your performance, your competency. And so, therefore, that really excellent letters of recommendation are earned. Nothing that should be surprising. Okay, what are some other considerations that you should think about when you discuss um, the possibility of rotating with a given at a given site? Well, is there someone who is responsible and is responsive to me? What if I have an emergency? What if there's a problem? What if I can't get to the rotation? What do I do? Or if I just maybe want to talk a little bit about it, I want to move my rotation, etc. So is there a responsive person, point of contact for the program? What's the charge for the rotation? What happens if there's an extending circumstance? What if I can't get my visa and I've paid, $2,500? What if, there's a illness in my family? What if my plane flight gets canceled? What ifs? Many what ifs that could happen. Do they provide refunds? Is there the possibility, if they're not refunds, that they could reschedule my rotation till later? When you think about the fees, you also want to just make sure that whatever they're telling you, is it included or is it an add-on? Are application and malpractice fees included or add-on? Credentialing background check included or an add-on? What about a visa invitation letter? Some places charge you some extra for doing that because it is additional work. And then housing and transportation. What are the options? Is there anything that's provided by the company that I doing the rotation with, or do I have to find my own housing? How does that work? Where have other students lived? And then furthermore, what's the transportation? Is the housing right on the campus of the hospital so I can walk? Do I need to rent a car? Do I need can I take public transportation? What's the situation? And then lastly, one of the things that I've seen lately is that with some companies, they have the opportunity for you to add on sort of research and publication support during a rotation, which I actually think can be very helpful. While you're on a rotation, you may have a great case, and this may allow you to write that case up while you're on the rotation, get the approval of your attending and everything, and submit it. And if you have some publication support, that could be a real bonus for you. So just something to consider. Okay, virtual rotations. So in general, I would say since virtual rotations are not hands-on rotations, they really add less to your overall application than experiential in-person rotations. But there are some hands-on rotations that have, as I've talked about, limited virtual components, which are just fine. Now, there's some of you who won't be able to come to the United States for whatever reason, economic reasons, visa reasons, whatever the case is. And so your only option may be to do something virtual. I would say that there are rotations that are 100% virtual that can be considered in certain situations. And I've listed some examples below. These are not meant to be a definitive listing of possibilities, but to give you some idea. For instance, a research program doesn't need to be in person. Telemedicine rotations are specifically designed to be like that. Pathology rotations, ethics rotations, where you discuss ethical principles and problems in its case discussions. Teleradiology, review of x-rays and various types of radiology imaging, patient safety or quality improvement electives, preventive health, and there are most certainly additional rotations, but I include this just for your interest. So in conclusion, what do I think you should do? Well, if you have the time, if you have the financial resources, and you're able to obtain the necessary visa, I would strongly consider you doing 2 or 3 US clinical rotations if you're an IMG. Do your research, make sure that you get the best clinical rotation, since not all of these are created equal. Because remember, what is your goal? Your goal is really to find the highest quality rotation or rotations possible that can enhance your residency application. So consider asking the questions I've outlined, ensure you get answers, and if possible, speak to others who can provide some direct personal insight into the nature of a given rotation you're considering, individuals who've done that rotation before and can give you essentially a thumbs up before you pay your money to have that rotation. So I wish you all good luck, and thanks for listening. Thanks for joining me today. My goal at My Application Coach is to deliver meaningful content in bite-sized segments. I'd be honored if you'd hit the button below to subscribe to my YouTube channel and graciously provide your comments. I also invite you to check out my website, imgspecialist.com, where I offer personalized services assisting serious applicants with mock interviews, ERIS and personal statement review, and much more. Thank you.